All right, everybody, welcome back. So we have our last and final speaker with us today, and I can't believe the day has gone by so quickly. Hopefully you guys got some really good information so far. A lot of you guys have been wondering about research. Research is such a big question from our students, so I really want to spend a little bit of time welcoming our next and final speaker. He is the head of partnerships at Polygence and consulting research coordinator at YesFlex Prep. He is an instructor for Stanford's vice provost for teaching and learning. He has taught colleges for 10 years at Williams and Stanford. He received his PhD in art history at Stanford University and his master's in history of art at Williams College. And he will be talking to you guys about research and college admission. So let's give a warm welcome to Dr. G.P. Laborde.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today. And I'm also really happy that my presentation will actually be related in many ways to the great presentations we've already heard. So what Marie said in her presentation and what Jenny noted in hers, as well as Wong Jong Kim, what he just mentioned about the importance of research, I'm excited to be able to share a little bit more about how to get into research as a high school student, and really why it's valuable, not just for your own experience, but why college admissions and colleges and universities in general are really interested in research. With that, let me begin my presentation. So the presentation will go a little something like this. I'll share with you my own research background. And then I'll move into defining what research is, why colleges value it, how research enhances your applications, and also going about how to find mentors in developing a topic en route to showcasing or sharing the work that you've worked so hard to put together. A little bit about my own background. My PhD from Stanford is in the history of art and architecture. And I've been really fortunate to have my focus, which is on modern art, art and technology and photography, be supported by a number of wonderful research foundations and institutions, including the Mellon Foundation, the Luce Foundation, and the U.S. Fulbright Commission.
Share your screen really quick.
Oh, thank you, Jenny. I'm so sorry. Here we are. I'll go back to my first slide for you. Sorry, all. This is the overview that I just alluded to. And here is, as I was just mentioning, a bit of my own research background. That picture is actually of a very proud yours truly on top of Mont Blanc in France, where I was doing research for my Fulbright grant on the history of alpine photography. My dissertation was on the first photographic survey of the Arctic from 1869, so very much related to issues of photography and climate change. And as you can see, I really spent a lot of time thinking about not only teaching, but also bringing research opportunities to students. At Stanford, after I finished my PhD, I actually managed an undergrad research program at the Center for Spatial and Textual Analysis. This was bringing students both from computer science and from humanities disciplines together to work on long-term faculty research projects. And teaching them research techniques was a big part of what I do then, and a big part of what I do now as well. You might be wondering what actually is research. I think a lot of it is very intuitive, but there are also some aspects of it that I wanted to just define for you. I like to think of it as mapping uncharted intellectual space through repeatable steps. And those steps include defining a clear question, reviewing the literature, applying these methods, experimenting with new tools, creating new hypotheses, and then beginning again. It's managing uncertainty in many ways as well. As Albert Einstein famously said, if we knew what it was we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? Now, the reason research is important to a lot of the schools that we've been discussing today is that it is considered the pinnacle of academic achievement in higher education. Many of the schools that were mentioned, including Stanford and Harvard and MIT, these are R1, which is to say the highest level of research conducted at these institutions. It's usually a collaboration between professors and students and is a primary factor in university rankings and grants. Speaking from my own home institution, I know it's an immense value proposition for those research institutions and programs as well. Getting students who are excited about research in really pushes not only the state of human knowledge forward, but can lead to amazing benefits in funding from external sources for these universities. A lot of great research happens at PUIs, predominantly undergraduate institutions. I went to a liberal arts college myself before going to graduate school at a bigger research university. And there are wonderful opportunities there as well. So it doesn't have to be one of those big R1 schools for you to find research that can be valuable to you and that can actually carry you to a big R1 school if you choose to do graduate work there in a professional field. A few notable inventions from Stanford research you may have heard about: antibody therapies developed in the 1980s, recombinant DNA developed in 1973. And of course, that's something we're talking about quite a lot as we're thinking about vaccine synthesis and public health. And you may also remember that Google, the essential PageRank algorithm developed in 1998 by Sergey Brin and Larry Page. This is just a translation of what that value is. It earned Stanford $336 million in a single year. Just speaking from academic year 2019-2020, you can see the gross revenue from Stanford's many different technologies, hundreds of technologies that they developed there was 114 million. 10 of those inventions generated more than 1 million in royalties each. And the total research budget for Stanford was $1.93 billion, accounting for about 17% of its annual funding. So this is all to say that every little person who contributes to these big research efforts, whether it's in computer science or bioengineering, or even in things like public health policy, these are all crucially important to pushing the university forward and by extension to improving society. This is why great schools want great researchers. And something that you may be interested to learn is that there are many schools that are seeing a reduction in applicants to their university research programs. This is something that a lot of schools are thinking of actively. There's just shortening, drying up of the pipeline of new researchers coming in. So it can be a really powerful way of distinguishing yourself, not only to apply to undergraduate schools, but if you're someone who envisions going back to graduate school for an MBA or becoming a doctor or even becoming a researcher within computer science or a biomedical field. Finding a way to begin that research training while you're still in high school, as Wong Kim was saying, just an amazing way of beginning that path of defining who you are and crafting that narrative that will shine. These are just some demonstrative quotes from a number of different sources I wanted to share. US News and World Report mentions that these personal projects that might be research or they might be something else like the volunteer work that you do, many of the other independent activities that our other panelists were discussing, they're so significant in your applications because they demonstrate commitment to a successful solo endeavor that conveys initiative, self-discipline, and originality. There are all of these different aspects of you and the person that you are aspiring to be that come through in those projects that you share. So crafting them in a very intentional way is very important. Grades and test scores, of course, are always important. Test scores much less so. We know that we're going through a big sea change for some undergraduate institutions, but something that we love to point out is Sir John Gurdon, who was a Nobel Prize winner in medicine and basically was the pioneer, a great innovator in stem cell research, was the last in his class in biology of 250 people. You don't need to be a brilliant grade getter in order to be an effective researcher. So this is also something to keep in mind. You need not have straight A's in order to jump into a research project that can help tap into the thing that you're actually passionate about and that will also help distinguish you from all of those other people who might also have great grades. This seismic shift in admissions that many of the other panelists alluded to as well is still playing out, but suffice to say that because many schools are not requiring test scores anymore, your grades and your extracurriculars count increasingly to defining who you are and sharing the value that you would bring to the undergraduate community that you want to be a part of. Admissions officers are very often thinking about piecing together a class with people with very different backgrounds and different strengths so that they can create a really unique community at their school. This is another one of these quotes that I really like from an admissions officer from Cornell. So all of these high achieving students, people with great grades, academically stellar with good test scores, but many of them lacked on their application a tangible indicator of their passion, some project, experiment, portfolio, or endeavor in which they spent substantial time learning, tinkering, or creating. And I really like this idea of combining these ideas of passion and tinkering and creating. The word actually that I want to pull out, though, is portfolio. Many students may have noticed that on the application portals for some great schools, including MIT, there are upload supplements for something called creative portfolios or research portfolios. MIT instituted this in 2013 as a way of helping students to share a little bit more about that amazing rocket that they built, or to describe the play that they wrote and directed themselves. Very often those can appear on an application, but they might not actually be entirely clear for the student or for the admissions readers, because maybe those admission readers are not rocket scientists themselves. And so they need to understand a little bit more of the process that went into it. They also love to see the sorts of challenges that you meet and overcome when you're going through this process of tinkering and creating. So portfolios come from the art world. My background is in the history of art and architecture, so it's a very familiar term for me. But I wanted to share a little bit more about how a portfolio can help you tell a story and how it can fit into those, the importance of fitting them into those essays that really tell an admissions reader who you are and what your path, what your intellectual journey has been like and what you hope it to continue to be. So this includes, these are just 8 traits of a strong portfolio. It needs to be self-reflective, driven by you, the student. You have to carefully select the things you want to share, so you're not pushing everything you've ever done into the same slide deck or 2-minute video. You're really carefully selecting things that show development. And that's goes to this point of evolving with students, consistent goals, illustrating growth. I think that's something that is really powerful to show. I thought this thing about this aspect of life before I began this project, and now I see it in a different light because I've made these discoveries. This tangible evidence of personal and technical growth, they really can come across in these research portfolios or creative projects that you put together. It allows you to stand out from the crowd, to be more understood by admissions officers who might not be experts in music or in biology. And it also taps into the idea of the maker movement, which is emphasizing lifelong learning rather than just earning degrees. I think that that's also a very powerful message to convey, that you're someone that doesn't just study when you're in school. You're trying to learn things outside of school to improve your own abilities and maybe also to give back to society with those efforts. Research teaches a lot of things that I think, I remember Wong Kim also mentioned things like organization and time management. These are all so important to learn going really at any point in life, but certainly going into college when you find yourself very often more on your own than you ever have been. Taking on a research project really requires a lot of forethought and planning. So you need to organize your thoughts. You need to come up with a system for taking notes and for filing new discoveries. You need to manage your time so that you know you have opportunities to set out 2 or 3 hours every week in order to keep on chunking away at your project. You have to communicate clearly. Very often, as we've seen over the course of the last year, there are scientists who have done amazing work finding new things, but the way that they express it or communicate it might be a little unclear for people. It might be too specific or scientific. They need to find a way of imparting that message to people who are not area experts in a way that's meaningful and clear. And because research so often involves experimentation and failure, it's also really important in developing a sense of resilience. So I think this really goes to the heart of what liberal education is as it's evolved in the United States. And this is a quote from Derek Bach, a former president of Harvard. The goal of education at schools that are, in the broadest terms, teaching students how to think is we want them to learn, communicate, build character, and prepare for a career. How to find a research mentor. There might be many people in your life who would be really excited to connect with you, to lead you along through their own experience. Very often I can say that I was inspired by someone in high school to go into the field that I'm in. And so I really enjoy connecting with students in order to, as we say, pay it forward, to really give back to this community and to pass insights on to the next generation who will someday grow up to be the next researchers, the next professors, the next industry leaders, what have you. But these people very often have little time. So a great way of approaching them is to finding someone with an interest in teaching or mentoring, and really identifying the specific area that they're good in. It's not, I want to be a computer scientist or I want to be a computer science major. Can you help me with that? It's asking things like, I've been trying to develop this program in Python and have been having a lot of trouble. Do you have any tips, or is there a resource you can point me to? Or even, this is a specific challenge in my code that I can't quite seem to crack. Could you help me with that? Also making sure to demonstrate that you understand what their specific area of expertise is. Finally, just being respectful of their time, knowing that this is someone who you are reaching out to ask for a favor, to ask for advice. And so really trying to treat it as, with great humility, and ask them to volunteer these efforts in order to help you on your own journey. So I wanted to talk a little bit about 3 examples of great research projects that we've overseen and that would be happy overseen at Polygens, where I'm the head of partnerships, and would be happy to support students in these opportunities with Yes Flex Prep. The first is maybe a subject that's very interesting for a number of different people for different reasons, but this one is a great example of tapping into something that's in the public that's in public discourse in the public sphere, but is also really technical. So this was a project that used artificial intelligence to detect gender bias in politics. And the method was using a very specific aspect of AI called NLP that has wide applications in many different fields, but effectively it performs large scale text analysis. And the student with her mentor, who's a PhD candidate in computational linguistics at Stanford, they analyzed the language used in the 2020 presidential elections. And the outcome was that they discovered a number of biases in the use of different words and adjectives and the connotations associated with them, like power, agency, and sentiment. And impressively, this abstract was accepted to a workshop at a prestigious conference of the Association for Computational Linguistics. Another great project, if you're someone that's interested in in the medical field broadly or in medical research. This was a computational analysis of cancer cells, specifically something I wasn't familiar with, but ribosome stalling trends and how that affects cancer translation. So basically the student was trying to understand what different types of mRNA sequencing lead to different sort of rates of the proliferation of cancer. And the outcome identified an important relationship really between redistribution and propensity for ribosomes to stall. This is obviously very complex, but it was overseen by this postdoc in computational biology at Princeton. And the article won acceptance into a peer-reviewed journal, the Journal of Emerging Investigators, which is one of the premier peer-reviewed secondary student journals in the world. Another great project also within the medical field that I love, because it's not just a research paper, but it is showing the different channels that research might be communicated in. So it's a podcast series on neurological disorders. For this, the student worked with Deborah, who is a doctor at Duke. And basically, it was a state of the field research project. So, which is to say, there's original research and then there are literature reviews. So this was going through a lot of different papers, understanding the methodologies, understanding trends within neurological diseases like dementia and amnesia. And the student basically combed through these case studies, experiments, and numerous academic sources in order to create a 7-episode podcast series that explains what memories are and how they're affected by disorders like amnesia and dementia. Really creatively, the student called this Foggy Minds, and it's a podcast that's available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, many other platforms. But just an example of showing you that research does not necessarily need to be something that results in published scholarship. It can be something that is really designed almost in sort of like a public, again, sort of like public intellectual space, or really just to share through different news outlets effectively. In order to find these mentors, which you can do on your own, make sure that you are not being vague, as I mentioned before. This was an example of an email that one of my colleagues received. It was a little difficult for this person to connect with the student. A much better example of an email is the student said, "I see that you're an expert in this. This is my problem. I'm really stuck right here. And so I'm wondering if you can help me." That shows that the student has really taken on a lot of their own efforts, and that they've already been able to jump in and make good progress on their own terms. That's something that's going to be really important when you decide to share your research on your college admissions applications. In order to develop a topic, the thing that I would encourage you to do is just embrace what inspires you. Research can be a long process. Typically not weeks, but months or years goes into a specific research project. And so you need to find something that's going to hold your attention, that you're actually really interested in, not just something that's popular or that you've read in the news, but something that you feel like can sustain you and that's perhaps connected to your desired college major or even to your career after college. I think it's also really essential to make sure that you celebrate your achievements when you get to the end of it. Even a failed experiment can be a successful experiment if it teaches you something new and helps you develop a new hypothesis. And when you have those failures, make sure to reach out to friends and family. They can be so frustrating and discouraging, but that's a part of building up that sort of resilience that I was mentioning. Treat it as another step along the journey rather than a roadblock in front of you. There are many different journals that you can publish in. These are just a sampling of them. Of course, there are wonderful competitions like Regeneron and the MIT Scholars Program. Here's another list of different publication outlets, just so you can see the sort of breadth with scientific STEM types of periodicals on one side and more humanities, social sciences on the other. But if this is something that you are interested in learning more about, we would be really happy to speak with you about it and to support your research efforts. It's a wonderful way to jump into something that is maybe a topic that's not offered at your school, but that you're really interested in. And also something, as many of the other panelists today have said, that can really shine on your applications and demonstrate a lot of things that are unique to you to help those admissions officers pull you out of the crowd.
Awesome. Thank you so much, GP. That's so informative. Like I said, I know a lot of students are looking for research opportunities, and we did get a lot of questions here today. So I just want to spend a little bit of time asking a couple. So a student asks, how do I apply to research programs, or how do I get research opportunities? Like, what are some of the steps that you would recommend that I take in order to make that happen?
This is a great question. You know, I think a great way to do it, and it can be very intimidating, you can just send cold emails to professors and graduate students in the areas that you think are the areas that you want to develop expertise in. Very often, those people will not respond, and that can be really frustrating, but just take it in stride and keep on trying, because sooner or later, I'm sure you will break through. Another word of advice on that: make sure that you've spent some time developing things. Don't reach out to someone who's at an advanced biology lab until you've done something like taken AP biology. You really want to have a firm groundwork so that if you are accepted, you can hit the ground running and feel like you're actually gaining experience rather than learning everything from the get-go when you arrive. The other opportunity, Jenny, and this is something that we are delighted to work with students on at Polygence and YesFlex Prep, is helping you find mentors through application. So you can apply to work with us. And essentially the way the process works is you have to describe the thing that you are passionate about first and let us know what work you've done to sort of develop a little bit of familiarity with the area. So if you want to do a computer science project, you need to tell us what kind of programming languages you already know and the area that you want to go afterwards. And then we actually will connect you with a mentor who is an expert in that area so that you have the support you need to develop your own project.
Super cool. So that it looks like they GP gave a lot of different options here for you guys who are looking for research opportunities. But as GP said, you have to come with something and you have to come with some sort of experience, and then they'll help you develop that even a little bit further. So make sure that you come with some level of passion. Don't say you want to research in geology but have no experience in rock science. So that's definitely a good point. Another quick question here is, what's the difference between research programs and internships?
This is a great question. Yes. Sometimes you might even see a combination of those two words, research internships. But by and large, I would say internships are more focused on industry experiences. So that might be something like working at a company where you are, helping develop a marketing plan, or working with a politician as an intern to learn the sort of ins and outs of local politics and how laws get made. Doing research might be a part of that as well. But by and large, research is more focused on, it's more focused on a specific area, and it's really trying to develop new knowledge. That might be a way of thinking of it. So instead of contributing to a business or to a school or a local government, it's really trying to think about committing and helping to expand a specific field of inquiry, whether that be biology or computer science or French literature.
That's a great point. And just going back to the cold calling and emailing professors, would you recommend students to start locally and like email professors within their area, or would you recommend that it's okay? Can they research with a professor that's out of state, that's not in the same kind of location as them?
This is another really good question. And I know it's been a real challenge this last year because even some local students who, students in New York who wish to work with professors or graduate students at Columbia, given COVID restrictions, it actually can be impossible to get your foot in the door at a lab in order to do wet experiments. So if there's an opportunity, if you see a way of connecting with people who are out of state at different schools, and doing work for them remotely, doing research that can contribute to their big projects while you're still, at home with your family and able to do all of your other obligations, that's a really great tack to take. And I will say too that the research opportunities at Polygence through YesFlex Prep are entirely remote. And so students can add them either to their busy summer activities or to pace them out a little bit more slowly during the academic year while they're taking classes. So there are, of course, no substitutes for getting your hands dirty in a lab and doing that kind of experimentation or pulling books from library shelves and discovering new things, but there's lots of convenience and other great opportunities for doing things remotely. So I definitely encourage students to explore that too.
Awesome. That's fantastic. And we have a very specific question from a student who asks, my father is a researcher and he does research on his own. Would it be okay if I researched under my father, or would I have to kind of do research elsewhere?
That is a great question. And I think that student is so fortunate to have someone who can model and mentor them, who they already have this wonderful family relationship with. In this sense, I might defer to someone who has, the breadth of experience that you or Marie do in admissions. If a student is doing something that's really interesting and unique with their parent, then absolutely, that sounds amazing to me. I can imagine, though, that an admissions officer might like to see the student branch out, make new connections, show that sort of courage and outgoing quality that they'll need when they get to school and their parent won't be there to help them with the research. So do everything you can with your father, and then maybe reach out to someone who your father knows or who's in a similar field and continue to develop that expertise on your own 2 feet.
I think that's literally the perfect answer as well, just because students need that kind of experience. And I'm sure college admissions will want to see that as well. And then another very specific question. So if I want to do research, but I have no idea where to start, right? If I kind of like this, I kind of like that, maybe I don't know what type of experiences I need. What would be the very first foundational levels of like starting point for a student who is going from scratch, has no idea what to do and how to start with research and what to even research on? What would your advice be for them?
Yes. Knowing where to start is maybe the trickiest part of things. And what I would say is take what you've learned in school. If there's a class or if there's a teacher in school that was really interesting to you, something that you just felt you really wanted to know more about, but the class didn't quite take you to the questions that you wanted to ask, start there. Go to that teacher or talk with your friends who are in that class about those issues. I'm sure that your teacher will be able to sort of steer you in the right direction. I think a great place to begin research and sort of get comfortable with different ideas is Wikipedia. It's not to say that you should take what's written on Wikipedia as true, but if you start to look down at the bottom, which is what all researchers do, at the citation index, then you can start to click through to say, oh, this was an article that was published by a reputable newspaper or journal. Oh, this was a report that this industry consulting group put together that shows actual data that they assembled. Start to get a firmer grasp of not just the ideas, but the people or the institutions, the books, the articles that make up the backbone of those ideas. And that's what research really is in terms of understanding what the state of the field is. So once you start to do that, then maybe you'll stumble across a journal. Great journals are all over the place that you can access online, things like Nature or Science. I'm trying to think of a good one within the humanities. Like the LA Review of Books, this sort of thing. If you look at these places and you see people who are actually academics, who are doing rigorous types of research studies, then you'll start to understand the field. And then hopefully you'll be able to say, it doesn't have to be a lifelong commitment, especially because you're in high school, but you have to say, this is the specific question that I want to answer. Why did this person do this? Or why did this thing evolve this way? And just go from there. Make that question specific and let that guide you.
I love that. And just kind of following up on that. So is research something that you feel like students can kind of do on their own? Do they have to do it with a professor or mentor? Is it something that, they can kind of start on their own and create their own kind of research project and paper?
Yes, it's definitely possible. Jenny, I took a lot of music classes growing up and I sang a cappella at Williams College. It was a great experience for me, but I was never going to be, I was never going to be a virtuoso musician or a prodigy. I played the trombone and sometimes people wanted to listen to it, but most of the time they didn't, But I needed a teacher. I could not have taught myself trombone from the beginning without a music teacher to sort of guide me along the way, to help me do the proper scales, to understand different compositions and rhythm. And I think a research mentor works exactly the same way. You can do this on your own and you can make great progress on your own. In point of fact, I'm sure that admissions officers would love to see that kind of initiative. But finding someone who is really an expert in the field to help you along the way, it just means that you have a better idea of where you are and where you need to go. And they're going to be able to give you a lot of tips and tricks to help you get there faster than you would otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You just won't know unless you are given the resources, and resources are almost one of the most important things in research, is to have someone who's going to give you those resources and help you and make sure that you're going in the right direction. So I can see how that's really important. So if you don't mind, GP, if you can just give us a quick summary of what your organization does for students out there who really want to look for research opportunities, just for those who might have missed it, if they especially want to maybe reach out to you, if you can just kind of let them know what you guys do to help students with research opportunities, that would be awesome.
Yes, well, I'm so happy to be here as part of the program with YesFlex Prep, where I'm the consulting research coordinator. And I work as the head of partnerships at Polygence, and we've partnered with YesFlex Prep to offer these research mentorships to students. Effectively, the way it works is the student will apply with a specific goal, a specific research question, like I want to learn more about CRISPR technologies, or I'm really interested in the birth of Keynesian economics and market capitalism, that sort of thing. And basically, we will interview the student and then try to find a mentor who's an advanced degree, PhD, MD candidate, or a professor, or even an industry expert, to work with the student to develop an original question, to show them how to build out a research plan, to help them project manage that so they're making progress towards their goals over the course of 3 to 6 months, and ultimately to share their work with the public, whether that be through submitting and publishing in a peer-reviewed secondary academic journal, or creating a podcast that lots of people will be able to hear and learn from. Or one great example or let me give you 2 great examples, because I just love both of them. We had one student who was interested in robotics, and he decided to work with a mentor who was a Master's of Science candidate in robotics at University of Michigan, to build a robot that would shovel snow for him, because he didn't want to shovel snow for himself anymore. So that's just a great example of bringing something that's a great narrative, but also has a lot of technical savvy behind it. Another wonderful student worked with an MFA from Tisch in order to create an original fashion line based on bugs. So she researched many different bugs across the whole insect kingdom, and identified 17 different bugs that had really unique traits or qualities, and used each one of them to design a specific fashion look, basically a dress or an ensemble for human women to wear. So it was just a really creative combination of fashion design and entomology research that, like I say, I think will really shine on her college application.